Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
So today we will be reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, verse number 32. So I'll chant the words and all of you could follow after me. Anaditvan nirgunatvat
Anaditya nirgunatat
paramatmayam avyayah
paramatmaya vaya
sharirasthopi kaunteya
sharirastopi kaunteya
na karoti na lipyate
na karati na lipate
Anaditva nirgunatvat
anaditva nirgunatvat
Paramatmayam avyayah
paramatmaya vaya
Sharirasthopi kaunteya
sharirastopi kaunteya
Na karoti na lipyate.
na karati na lipate
One more time. Anaditva nirgunatvat
anaditva nirgunatvat
Paramatmayam avyayah
Paramatmanam
Sharirasthopi kaunteya
Sharirasthopi kunteha
Na karoti na lipyate.
na karoti na lipate.
Some of you would like to chant.
Anaditva nirgunatvat
Anaditva nirgunatvat
Nirgunamatvat
paramatmayam avyayah
Paramatmayam avyayah
sharirastopi kaunteya
Sharirasthopi kaunteya
na karoti na lipyate.
Na karoti na lipyate.
I will chant now. Anaditya nirgunatyat
Anaditva nirgunatvat
Paramatma ayam abhaya
Paramatmayam avyayah
Sharirastho yopi kunteya
Sharirasthopi kaunteya
na karati na lipate.
Na karoti na lipyate. Anyone else?
Anaditvan nirgunatvat
Anaditva nirgunatvat
Paramatmayam avyayaha
Paramatmayam avyayah
Sharirastopi kaunteya
Sharirastopi kaunteya
Nakaroti navite
Na
karoti na lipyate.
So we'll start with the word by word meaning. Anaditvat,
Anaditvat
due to eternity.
due to eternity.
Nirgunatvat,
Nirgunatvat
due to being transcendental.
due to being transcendental.
Param,
Param
beyond material nature.
Beyond
material nature.
Atma,
Atma
spirit.
spirit.
Ayam,
Ayam
this.
this.
Avyayah,
Avyayah
inexhaustible.
inexhaustible.
Sharirastha,
Sharirastha
dwelling in the body.
dwelling in the body.
Api,
Opi
though.
Though
Kaunteya,
Kaunteya,
O son of Kunti.
O son of Kunti,
Na karoti,
na karoti,
never does anything.
never does
anything.
Na lipyate,
na lipyate,
nor is he entangled.
nor is he entangled.
Now I will read the translation and the purport provided by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Those with vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjun, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. I'll repeat it once again. Those with the vision of eternity can see that the imperishable soul is transcendental, eternal, and beyond the modes of nature. Despite contact with the material body, O Arjun, the soul neither does anything nor is entangled. Purport. A living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body. But actually, the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body, he is transcendental and eternal. Thus, he cannot be destroyed. By nature, he is full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him. So, Srila Prabhupada has given us a pretty short purport here, but it's at the same time extremely powerful. And I mean, this entire theme of us being the soul, you would find when you listen to Srila Prabhupada, he has emphasized it, repeated it multiple times. Like this is perhaps the most quoted theme by Srila Prabhupada, that we are not this body, we are eternal soul. And throughout his lifetime, Prabhupada made sure that this understanding is provided to his disciples. Right? So Prabhupada is saying a living entity appears to be born because of the birth of the material body, but actually the living entity is eternal. He is not born, and in spite of his being situated in a material body. So although it is situated in the material body, but it is actually not born, as we see this at other places as well throughout Bhagavad Gita. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya ajo nityo shashvato yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharira. Right. So na jayate, the one who never takes birth. Mriyate, the one who never dies. Right. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya, the one which never came into being and will not come into being. Ajo nityo shashvato yam purano. Ajo means unborn. Nitya means eternal. And Shashwat means permanent. Na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So although the body could be killed, but that eternal soul, no damage happens to it. Even though you may give an injury to the body is susceptible to the injuries, but the soul cannot really be injured, right? So again, here, the same concept has been emphasized about the eternal nature of the soul, who we actually are. Thus, he cannot be destroyed. By nature, he is full of bliss, right? So by nature, the soul is full of bliss, and that could be understood by the fact that we are eternal parts and parcel of the Supreme, who is full of bliss himself, right? Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Govinda Sarva Karan Karana. So Satchidananda Vigraha. So the word Anand essentially is referring to bliss, right? So because Krishna himself, he himself is the embodiment of bliss or Anand, right? He's 100% completely blissful by his own capacity, spontaneously blissful, right? And since we are his part and parcel, we also, our constitutional position is also to be eternally blissful. But as we learned a few weeks ago, and we recited another verse where in the same chapter, Krishna is talking about what is worth knowing or what is knowable, where Krishna is discussing that the knowledge of the Kshetragya, and by Kshetragya he's referring to who we actually are, the living entity, and Kshetragya is also Paramatma, or the super soul, right? And what is the relationship between the two, right? So there in that purport, Prabhupada makes that differentiation between Jivatma, or the living entity, and Paramatma, or the super soul. So although the term Brahma or Brahman is used interchangeably sometimes to refer to both, but there is an important difference between the two, right? And that difference is that although Jivatma and Paramatma both are Brahman, but Paramatma is self-sufficient. So he's called as Ananda Brahma, right? Whereas Jivatma, he's called as Vijnana Brahma, right? So why is he called Ananda Brahma? Because Krishna, he does not need any, he does not need anyone else, or he does not depend on anything else for his spontaneous blissful nature. He is self-sufficient. Whereas the living entity, for us to be happy, for us to be blissful, we have to be reminded of our relationship with Krishna, which is that of an eternal servant, right? So as long as we are serving Krishna, as long as we are engaged in the loving service of Krishna, we are blissful. But as soon as we forget that, right, we tend to lose that bliss and we try to find it, right? So, but our original position or our position of is by nature full of bliss. He does not engage himself in any material activities. Therefore, the activities performed due to his contact with material bodies do not entangle him, right? So here we see, right, we are, although we are eternally, we are supposed to be blissful, right? But why are we then engaged in these material activities, right? So that becomes a natural question, right? And Krishna is responding to that, right? So Krishna is saying, Mamai Vamsho Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, Manashasthani Indriyani, Prakriti Sthani Karshati, Krishna is saying. So as I just mentioned, we are blissful because we are part and parcels of the supreme, the absolute entity, which is Krishna, right? And here Krishna is saying, Mamev Ansha Jiva Loke. So Mam Ev Ansh. So all of these living entities are certainly Ansh, or the parts of myself, Krishna is saying. But we are currently Jiva Loka, in this material, we are struggling in this material nature. Mana Sasthani Indriyani, right? So we all of us know that we have senses, right? So we have 5 gross senses, but Krishna is also referring to Mana, or the mind, as the 6th sense, right? So Mana Sasthani Indriyani, Prakriti Sthani Karshati. We are struggling really, really hard. This word Karshati means to work very hard. So all of us are working really, really hard, struggling in this existence of the material world, although we are eternally his part and parcels, right? So now the natural question arises that why are we struggling in this material world, right? I mean, what was the need? If we are eternally blissful, we are supposed to be his part and parcels, right? Our eternal nature is to be blissful, then why are we struggling in this material nature? Sometimes, many people tend to blame God that, what was the need for him to put us into this material world, right? But that is nothing but out of our foolishness that we tend to think like that. Because Krishna is very clearly mentioning, I mean, if you look at Bhagavad Gita, he has really answered all of our questions. So Krishna is saying, Prakrite Kriyamanani Gune Karmani Sarvasha Ahankar Vimoodatma Kartaham iti mannate. So Prakrite Kriyamanani. Actually, it's this material nature who is doing all of the activities as we see it here. Gune Karmani Sarvasha Ahankar Vimoodatma Kartaham iti mannate. Right. So I would emphasize more on the last sentence. Kartaham iti mannate. So we believe, or the living entities, or the Jivatma, we, out of our foolishness, right, we think that we are the doers. Karta aham iti manyate. We understand in our, because of the illusion, because of our false ego, we think that we are the doers, right? And what does the term doer here means in this context, right? So I was referring to as to why, although we are part and parcels of the Supreme Being, we are part and parcels of Krishna, right? But why are we working so hard in this material world, right? And from this verse, we could understand why, right? That's because we understand out of our foolishness, and Krishna is using the term Vimoodatma. Moodha means foolish, the one who is foolish. So Krishna is actually using a strong word here, right? So we have to take this, we have to understand this in the right context, right? So he's using a strong, relatively strong language. he's essentially considering us fools to think that we are the doers, right? So because of this mentality that we are the doers, and doers in this context means trying to control, right? Because we being parts and parcel of Krishna, right? We see Krishna is the supreme controller, and because we are his part and parcels, this tendency to control or to be the doers is also in us. Although our eternal position is what? Our eternal position is to serve Krishna. But instead of doing that, what we are trying to do is we are trying to run the show, essentially. And that becomes the cause of our miseries, really, right? That's at the root cause. Our tendency to forget our relationship with Krishna, with the Supreme Being, that of an eternal servant, and to think that we ourselves are the doers or the controllers. Nothing could be further from the truth. As Krishna is saying, Maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sa characharam hetu nanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. So Maya dhakshena prakriti, adhyaksh means the one who is giving the directions, or the president. Maya means me. So under my guidance, Maya dhakshena prakriti, my material nature, which is nothing but Krishna's energy, right? So Maya is Krishna's inferior energy, and we'll talk about that as well, right? So Maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sa characharam. It's moving every moving and non-moving entity, right? Everything is working, or basically the show as we see it here, this material world tends to be, a wonderful show to us, right? There's so much activity going on in this material world, right? So Krishna essentially is saying that my Maya Shakti is actually running the show under my guidance. Maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sa characharam hetu nanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. There is no other reason but this. As we see this world transforming, right? So many people are, or so many things are happening every day. People are taking birth, someone else is dying. Someone works so hard to gather a lot of material wealth and a lot of fame, right? But all of that dies as soon as the person dies, right? But we foolishly think that we are the controllers. Whereas here, Krishna is clearly stating our situation, right? So it's nothing but our foolishness. And why has that foolishness come? Because here we are under the three modes, working under the three modes of the material nature, right? So we foolishly think that we are the controllers, right? So essentially, we are the eternal source or part and parcels of Krishna. But because of our tendency to be the controllers or the doers, we want to do that. We are immediately put under the influence of Maya, right? So basically, we are so weak that we cannot even experience this feeling of being the controllers without Krishna facilitating that, right? Really. And that was the reason why he created this world. I mean, that's the whole point. This world is essentially created for us so that basically Krishna is facilitating this desire. Okay, you want to be the controllers? Sure, why not? Try to control. I've created this entire world for you. It's like he has created this entire virtual reality for us, right? It's like you have put on those virtual reality goggles on your head. I'm not sure how many of you have played video games. I was quite addicted to video games. I don't get the time these days, but when I lived at base, it's once so happened that we had a pretty strict regimen over there. It was very, very important for us to get up at 3:30, because we used to have Mangal Aarti at 4 o'clock. And that was in India. It's like around 2009, 2010, around that time. And, in India, around the summer times, it's not a big deal to get up so early in the morning, but it was very strictly enforced, right? And I was young at that time. So once it so happened that I was engaged in playing video game on my laptop, and it was around midnight. And then I thought, probably I should continue playing, because if I stop now, I won't be able to get up for Mangal Aarti. So I just continued playing. And then our base in charge, who was really good, Anand Prabhu, he's currently heading our temple, or the efforts to create a temple in Shimla in India. So wonderful, wonderful devotee, right? So he came as he got up, he came to around and he was looking around as to see what everyone is doing. And almost everyone was sleeping except me. And he found me red-handed. I was playing a video game, right? So I was quite addicted, but to find an excuse, I told him I take spiritual inspiration. I was quite young at that time. I take spiritual inspiration by playing a video game. And I related it to how, just like Krishna has created this entire world, this creation to facilitate our desire to be the controllers, right? We are trying to engage our mind in this material world and trying to become the controllers. Just like, in a video game, if you put on those virtual reality headsets, right? And you tend to forget who you actually are, right? You are so immersed in that experience. You're enjoying playing that game so much that you tend to forget who you really are, right? And Krishna being the perfect, right? Whatever he does it perfectly, right? So therefore, he has created this perfect world using his Maya Shakti, or the material energy, Mahamaya, right? And through the three modes of material nature, right? All of us are bewildered, right? We are not able to differentiate. We are not able to understand that this is not the absolute reality, right? We are totally away from the absolute truth, right? And we are so very much immersed or engaged in trying to make the best use of this material world in a wrong way, right? Trying to control. And that's why you see, everyone in this world is engaged in all sorts of activities, trying to make money, trying to gain fame. I mean, if you look at all of the activities, all of the things that happen in this material world, right? You would find, you could justify, or you could understand that why is everyone running after money and fame, right? Because the more money a person has, I mean, up to a certain point, of course, you want to satisfy your material needs, right? But the real need is really to be the controller, right? That's what we want to do. Because the more money you have, what does it translate into? That you can control more and more, right? You can engage more and more people in running this world the way you like. Like today we have Jeff Bezos, who is the richest man, right? And he has Amazon. He's trying to do so many different things, right? Pretty much every aspect of our lives these days is there is some influence of Amazon, right? Whether it's especially during the lockdown, right? Whether it's ordering groceries from the Whole Foods market, or our day-to-day necessities, or many of the businesses that are running are using Amazon Web Services, the cloud services that have been developed by Amazon. So the point being, as soon as a living entity gets the opportunity, right, he tries to make the best use of the abilities that have been provided to him by Krishna, right? All of the abilities that we have are actually coming from Krishna. And Krishna says that. So we try to immediately use all of those skills that have been provided to us in trying to control, or in trying to become God, really. Right? And that's why we see there is so much hankering for money, for wealth, for name and fame, because the more you have all of these resources, the better controller you could become, right? So we see this tireless effort going on, but we have to understand that what it is that it's really leading us to, right? Although, we may try hard to gather the wealth and to do all sorts of activities, but we have to understand that at the end of the day, all of this has to end. I mean, if you are a millionaire in this birth, there is no way for you to carry all of those $1 million when you take birth again into the next life, right? So it's not possible. But we tend to forget that we are just so absorbed in this experience that has been facilitated by Krishna to facilitate this desire of us being the controllers, right? And you would ask that what was the need to do that? Why was this desire facilitated, right? And that's because Krishna does not like to intervene in our free will, right? All of us have our own independent existence. Although we are parts and parcel of Krishna, Krishna has provided us a free will, right? And he does not like to violate that. So he's facilitating that, but he has created such a nice facility, right? As he's saying in this verse himself, that whatever experiences we are having in this world actually do not impact the soul. They do not really impact who we actually are. So, I mean, just imagine if you're sitting in a big movie theater, watching a horror show, right? Because actually this material world, as Krishna defines it, tukhalyam ashashvatam, right? We get all sorts of experiences here, right? But just imagine if you're sitting in this movie theater and there is a horror movie going on, right? You may be scared like anything, right? You are enjoying, but at the same time, you are really, really scared. But as soon as you come out of that movie show, right, there are no long-lasting impacts of it, right? It may linger on for a little bit, but really there is no impact, right? Because whatever it is on the screen is actually cannot come out of the screen and do any harm to you, right? It's all virtual. Similarly, when playing the video game, I really like that analogy, right? While playing the video game, for example, I really like this car racing game, Need for Speed, right? So no matter how many times you crash your car, although you're driving that car, but nothing happens to you. Everything happens to the avatar or, your avatar that's inside that game, right? So it's all confined within that system. No actual or real harm happens to the person who is actually sitting outside that game, right? So our situation is similar, right? Although we are living in this world, but Krishna is clearly stating that there are no impacts, or the soul remains untouched by anything material. It's just because of our false ego, right? As he has described all of his energies, right? Even we are his energies. Bhumir apo nalo vayu kham man buddhir evacha ahankar itiyam me bhinna prakriti ashtada aparayam itasta anyam prakriti viddhi me param jiva bhuta mahabaho ya idam dharyate jagat. Krishna is saying. So he's very clearly, I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, it's just amazing how Krishna has described everything in such a detail in just 700 verses in the middle of the battlefield. He has given us really everything. If you relate all of these verses with one another, you could very clearly see the full picture, right? So Krishna is saying, Bhumir apo anal vayu. So Bhumi, of course, we know is earth. Apo means water. Anal means fire. Vayu means air. Kham means ether or vacuum. Evacha ahankar. Ahankar is essentially false ego. So all of these material, as we see them, earth, water, fire, air, either material elements, right? And there are subtle elements, right? Mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then he's saying aparyam itasta anyam, beyond of, aside of this, aparyam itasta anyam prakriti viddhi me param. Param means the one that is superior to this inferior energy, right? So the inferior energy is constituted of the 5 gross elements and the 3 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego. And then Krishna is stating that there is a superior energy, Jiva Bhuta Mahabaho, Yaidam Dharyate Jagat. All of these living entities, the conditioned living entities, who are trying to exploit the material nature, right? So we are nothing but a superior energy of Krishna. We are his part and parcels. And we are trying really, really hard in this material world to exploit, to find out some pleasure. Somehow, if you could find some pleasure in this material world, and the primary objective here is trying to control, because we think instead of understanding that we are servants of Krishna, that the real bliss we get is by serving Krishna, we think that we get happiness by controlling, right? Which cannot be nothing further than truth, right? There cannot be anything further from the truth. For us to control is like, a bicycle trying to pull a truck. I mean, it's not really meant for us. And that's why we see we fail so spectacularly when we try to control, right? Have you seen anyone in this world who can be eternally the richest person in the world? I mean, a few years back, we had Bill Gates, right, who was at the number 1, and now we have Jeff Bezos. Few years back, we had Yahoo. It was such a big company, and now no one knows them. There was a company called Nokia who used to make phones, and it was one of the biggest phone manufacturers, and now no one knows them. It shut down its business, right? So we see, people can hold a position for a very small amount of time, right? Because we have limited influence. And to maintain that, just to maintain that influence or that control that we get for some time, we have to invest so much energy and time, right? We have to be always on our toes because someone else, so many other people are trying to take that position, right? So to be the controllers is not natural to us. It's not our natural tendency. Our natural tendency is to be happy, right? And how could that be? By serving the one who is actually meant to control, right? Because Krishna, for him to control is natural, right? He is the creator. Everything is coming from him, right? So for him, it's like a natural state, but it is not natural for us, right? So therefore, what's natural for us is to understand that we are his part and parcels and to somehow engage in his loving service, right? But all of us know that it's the most difficult thing to do. I mean, if it was that easy, we would have already done that, right? And that's why Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us this wonderful process of bhakti. I mean, if you think about it, although Krishna explains everything in Bhagavad Gita, when he talks about bhakti, right, he's saying Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Paramam Idam Uttamam Pratyaksh Avgamam Dharmam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. So this term Pratyaksh Avgamam Dharmam, I really find it very, very important, right? Because we bhakti, sometimes people say that it's something emotional, right? It's not really practical. People tend to say that. Like many times I've had discussions with people who tend to be more on the rationalist side, right? They believe only something that has been proven by science, and they consider bhakti to be something emotional. But here in this verse, Krishna is saying that it's not correct. When he's talking about bhakti, where he's referring to bhakti as Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Paramam Idam Uttamam, the topmost. And then he's saying Pratyaksh Avgamam Dharmam, that bhakti can practically make you realize or understand your dharma or your constitutional position, which is nothing but to serve Krishna, to serve the absolute truth. And it can practically, Krishna is saying Pratyaksh Avgamam, it can give us practical realization of that, right? So he tells that in Bhagavad Gita, but when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu comes, he lays out more details around it, right? How is it practical? And he has given us such a beautiful process, right? The 10 stages of bhakti that he has provided us. So very practically, he has laid out what kind of things will you experience as you go through this process, right? So he's saying that it starts with Ado Shraddha, just like anything else in life, right? Ado Shraddha means you have to have a little faith to start with, to begin into the process, right? And that's true for even for material education, right? I mean, when we are young, right, for us to go into school, when the teacher tells us that A means apple, at that time we have no option but just to believe what the teacher is saying. So the teacher is saying A means A is for apple, so we understand, okay, yeah, A is an apple, right? We don't question why is that, right? So everything starts with a little bit of a faith, but when we start from that faith, then the process starts to work. And then as the process starts to work, gradually we can have realizations based on which we can completely understand or realize that yes, what I'm experiencing is actually authentic. The process actually works, right? So it starts with little Shraddha and then Sadhu Sangha, right? Once you have a little faith, that's all is needed. You come to ISKCON of Connecticut, just like, when I came first to the US, although I was associated with ISKCON even while I was in India, but when I came here, I immediately looked where is the nearest ISKCON temple, and I immediately drove to our Hartford temple, right? And Pyari Prabhu, of course, being very merciful, he opened the door and very nicely, we had wonderful deities, we took the darshans, and Pyari Prabhuji was there. He gave us nice prasadam, and he told us about a devotee who used to live like just 2 homes away in New Haven, Ramananda Prabhu. And that's how, we were able to find association, right? Even after coming to the US. So Sadhu Sangha is the next step. Once you have a little faith, Krishna has made ample arrangement. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna, and of course, that has been possible by Prabhupada, right? Because of his mercy, we could pretty much go anywhere in the world and we will be able to find some Sadhu Sangha, right? So then the Sadhu Sangha starts, and when the Sadhu Sangha happens, we can start the bhajan kriya. That's when the actual bhakti process starts. We start bhajan, and predominantly the process of bhajan is Nam Sankirtan, or chanting, right? We engage in chanting, and then once we chant, then the next step is of anartha nivriti, right? Gradually the cleansing process starts, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is referring to that in Shikshashtakam, right? Cheto Darpan Marjanam, right? So that's the point where it starts. Mahaprabhu is starting Shikshashtakam, and he has beautifully laid out all of these. Actually, he has touched upon these 10 stages, ending with Ashlesh Shiva Padartam Pinashtumam, right? That's the ultimate stage of prema, where whether you embrace me or you trample me under your feet, I am eternally yours, right? It's like unconditional surrender. Sarv dharman paritajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita. You don't have to do anything. Just unconditionally surrender unto me, right? The unconditional surrender, that's the state where we have to go. And once that happens, we don't have to worry about anything, right? And Mahaprabhu has laid it down so nicely and so beautifully in Shikshashtakam, and the 10 stages of bhakti, which Mahaprabhu gave to Srila Rupa Goswami on the Shashwamedh Ghat, and then Srila Rupa Goswami so nicely laid it out in Nectar of Devotion, right? So most of us are basically stuck between bhajan kriya and anartha nivriti, right? So we do some bhajan, then some anartha nivriti happens. But personally for me, that has been the biggest challenge, to cross the stage of anartha nivriti and then move on to the next stages of nishtha, ruchi, asakti, and then bhavan prem. I can't even think of that, right? And that's primarily because we are not doing offenseless chanting. And that too, from Padma Puran, we have the 10 offenses which we recite every morning. Prabhupada has given us, our acharyas have given us such a nice process. Every morning before we chant, we recite those 10 offenses, right? And out of those 10 offenses, particularly the first offense and the last offense really stand out for me, right? The first offense is really Vaishnava Aparadh. And the last one is, even though we hear so much about the potency of Harinam, even then we have this material attachment, right? We are still attached to this material world. So although all of the 10 offenses are really, really important, but these two really, really stand out to me personally in my spiritual practice. The first one, which has been emphasized a lot, and rightly so, which is Vaishnava Aparadh. Because if you think about it, the entire foundation is based on Sadhu Sangha, right? The second step. After you have little Shraddha, you have to have a Sadhu Sangha. And if you don't have Sadhu Sangha, you cannot really move on to the next stage of Bhajan Kriya, right? And Vaishnava Aparadh just destroys that foundation. And we have to understand that when we say we should not do Vaishnava Aparadh, it's not like we are doing a favor to the Vaishnav against whom we are committing that aparadh or blaspheming or finding faults about someone. It's more for us, right? Because once we look at people with whom we want to associate, if we start looking at faults in them, we do not want to associate with them anymore, right? So that becomes a problem. That's how our mind tricks us. Because remember, mind is our biggest friend and the biggest enemy at the same time. It's all about our mind. So if somehow our mind thinks, and it can only look at faults in a group of people, it would restrict us or prohibit us from taking association of those people. And if you stop taking association of Vaishnavas or sadhus, right, there is no bhajan kriya, and we can forget about all of the other stages, right? So that's the most important, right? And the 10th or the last one, what happens to me personally, I've observed is, as the Cheto Darpan Marjanam process starts, as the Anartha Nivriti starts, we are still willingly, we sort of tend to stick to the material world. As soon as the detachment starts to happen in this material world, we try to pull ourselves back into the material world, right? Because somehow there is that fear of giving up whatever we have in the material world, right? So that is extremely important, that we have to let go. Ultimately, if we do not let go, we are not really allowing this process to take us ahead. It's not really fault in the process. The fault is really with us, because although we are trying to progress in the path of bhakti, but at the same time, we try to stop our progress by sort of trying to remain attached or trying to stop the process of anartha nivriti, right? So all of this, it's very important for us, therefore, to chant offenselessly as much as we can. And with practice, eventually we can very practically see how this process has the potency to take us to perfection, right? And the perfection is for us to completely surrender into Krishna and understand that we are his eternal parts and parcels, right? Once that understanding is developed, then we have achieved the whole objective of our life, right? So that's why it's very, very important for us to have the association of the devotees, to avoid Vaishnava Aparadh as much as we can, of course, all of the 10 offenses, and try to engage in chanting and listening to the holy name as much as we can with great patience, believing that one day we will be able to achieve the ultimate stage. Because if it has worked for so many people before us, right? If you look across different time and space, right? There are so many examples of so many exalted devotees of Krishna. We read so much about them in Srimad Bhagavatam. We read so much about them in Chaitanya Charitamrita and other places. Plus, I mean, if you go to any holy place, you will find examples of so many devotees who have achieved perfection by following the path of bhakti, right? It's perfect. It's like the perfect path, tried and tested path, right? The safest bet. And most importantly, susukham kartum, right? It's wonderfully, like, there are no troubles in it. In fact, it's joyfully performed, right? All we have to do is chant, dance, eat wonderful prasadam, and a little bit of a struggle while chanting. But if we can overcome that, eventually with time, we could see that this process would lead us to perfection. So with that, it's 7:45. I would like to take a pause and see if there are any questions or comments.
I liked your video game analogy very much.
Thank you.
Because yes, I mean, we are really trying to, win in this virtual reality. We are always trying to win. And even when we do win, we're not necessarily happy. So it's a very good analogy. But I was also thinking, when we transform that into Krishna's service, even within our current situation, then that virtual reality actually becomes a spiritual reality, a real reality.
Yep, absolutely. That's a wonderful thought, Mataji. Very rightly put. And I mean, that's the whole point, right? Because currently, if we take that analogy a little further, right? So that the boundaries of that video game really have become our boundaries, because we consider this to be the absolute reality, right? So we are confined within this. And so we have to use the mind, intelligence, ego that have been provided to us. And Krishna is so kind. He has also sent devotees like Srila Prabhupada, right? We are acharyas, they are all eternal servants of Krishna, and Krishna has actually arranged it for us. Listening to them, by engaging these senses to them, we can transform that false ego into the real ego, and the real that I am the servant of Krishna, right? So to perfection actually comes out from this virtual reality itself, as you pointed out. Just by sort of changing our ways of life, instead of engaging in the service of Maya, if we can engage ourselves in service of Krishna by listening to our acharyas, that process, the same virtual reality will take us to the actual or the absolute reality.
Right. And at the same time, I also liked your analogy of you could crash your car, it's really not happening to you. So even in our material world, all our happiness and distress is really not happening to us, but we are thinking it's happening to us, But if you really try to look outside of it, it's really like a bad dream that's going to end, at some point. It's a daydream versus a night dream,
Yeah, absolutely, Mataji.
But I also had a question.
Sure, Mataji.
So actually, since this COVID thing started and I'm on like all these Zoom calls, I have been like extremely happy in association of devotees. and I'm thrilled that I'm not being invited to like, stupid 50th wedding anniversary parties, picnics, and all these karmi associations that I'm kind of forced to do, at other times. I'm like so happy that I don't have to go to any of them right now, because there's an excuse of COVID, and nobody's having any of these parties, in fact, one of our friends just had a 50th wedding anniversary today, and they said like, oh, it's too bad we can't have a party, once this COVID thing is over, we'll have a big party. And I'm thinking like, oh no, I have to go to a stupid party again after this COVID thing is over.
Right.
So, but the point is, how do you, I think for the most part, I tried to I've disassociated as much as I could, from these material associations and try to keep spiritual associations as much as I can. But sometimes it almost seems a little unavoidable, and you feel like, how do you work with this?
Yeah. That's a very good point, Mataji. And I mean, as devotees, we feel this all the time. And this is something that is a very practical aspect of bhakti, right? And different things could work for different people. Personally, for me, I think that we should not pull ourselves back from going out, and especially for kids, I feel that is important, because if we sort of somehow lose our touch from the material world totally, like in a physical sense, that could also become a burden, and it could work for different ways for different people. I'm talking about personally for myself. So the way I deal with it is, I usually, if I go out at some place, I usually start discussions around these topics. I do not directly bring Krishna into it, of course, but generally I felt these topics, especially about that we are working so hard, but eventually everything will be lost, right? Not put it so directly, but in a subtle way, people understand philosophy and spirituality. I mean, some people are really, really excited about it. I found that, in a group of 10 people, you would find at least one or two who would be excited about that. And in a very,
right.
You discuss this with them. And of course, at one point, people who know you pretty well, they would understand where he's coming from. And, at that point, you know how to deal with them, and they know how to deal with you, right? But I have found this strategy works pretty well. And in fact, I have found people who have been sort of attracted to Krishna consciousness by my doing that. It's like a way of preaching, but in a very subtle way. I avoid bringing Krishna straightforward, like directly in the first conversation. So I start with, some other philosophical aspect of life, and then gradually, if I see interest, gradually I bring people in. So, and I find it for myself, I find it very refreshing. It's like making the best use of a bad situation, right? We do not.
Right. I mean, to some degree, generally you can discuss philosophy, which I do also, because what else do we talk about? It's in our head all the time.
That's so true. I mean, I found that so many times, even sometimes discussing with my wife, she used to say that whatever I discuss, you always come to Krishna consciousness.
I know, right? Even my husband says that to me. Do you have to bring Krishna into everything? And the only answer I have is yes.
Because everything is associated with Krishna eventually, right? And after a certain point, by the mercy of Prabhupada, we get that understanding.
But one other thing that I do generally is, no matter where I go, I always take a prasadam dish. So that way, at least there is one piece of something there that is prasadam for everybody, and even for yourself, you can eat most of that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is another good way. Yeah. So, I personally just feel we have to transform our material activities into spiritual activities, rather than trying to avoid them altogether, especially because we are a preaching movement, right? We are not bhajananandis. We have to, Prabhupada has instructed us, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually has instructed us, Yare dekha tahe ka Krishna upadesh, right? Where we just talk about Krishna. So we actually do want to go out. We do want to engage with people who are in the material world. Of course, we have to be conscious, and we have to have a safeguard, right? And the safeguard is our sadhana. The stronger our sadhana, the better the safeguard we have. But, we should just go out, engage with them, and in a very subtle way, we have to try to sort of bring them and deal with them.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah.
And have a nice night. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question or a comment, really. It's about how you had said about planting the seed and watching it grow since I came into the movement through my marriage. I've learned in the 10 years or so I've grown. I've noticed that when we had the Bhakti Vishnu program going on Friday nights, like I became more and more involved. It's like a natural thing. Is that how we're supposed to just move to do our own thing gradually, even though I still know I'm down at the bottom. I don't know what step I'm at towards the top. I mean, it's something like that. I don't know. It's just by how you said, like planting the seed and watching it grow and everything else like that. Is that by how you mean for the movement or for ISKCON?
So Mata, is that a question?
No, it was just more of a comment.
Right.
More of a comment.
No, absolutely. Right. So, I mean, the process has been laid out so wonderfully by Prabhupada. If we simply stick to the process, we don't really have to do much. If we just sincerely stick to it, like you said, when you attend Bhakti Vrikshas or you attend the temple. So that spark, somehow or the other, we just have to keep that fire on. And of course, at a certain point, we have to push a little harder, right? And that depends on our personal thing when that happens. Sometimes it also depends on mercy, because eventually the perfection really depends on mercy. But at least I personally think we have to have good relationships with some devotees, right? Because eventually the mercy of Krishna comes through devotees. And mercy is something, someone cannot force it on you. Therefore, unless and until you have a good relationship with at least a few devotees, to the extent that when they come to give mercy to you, you are ready to accept it. Like, for example, I'll tell you what I mean. Sometimes what happens is we tend to be lazy. We do not come to the temple, right? And then suddenly I get a call from a devotee. Prabhuji, I didn't see you for last 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the temple, right? So immediately the thought that should come to our mind is, oh, wow, that's such a wonderful arrangement by Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. I've got a devotee who is calling me. Why are you not coming to the temple, right? Because by going to the temple, my bhakti would improve, right? So because I allowed that person that level of freedom that he could give me a call and say, why are you not coming to the temple, right? He can question me. Instead of getting offended, if I can welcome that by becoming receptive or by establishing a strong bond, making the other person comfortable that he can call me and say that, why are you not questioning my choice of not coming to the temple, right? We should have at least that level of engagement with the devotees. And it is very, very important for us to progress. If nothing else, if this one aspect of bhakti, if we can sort of pay close attention to, that we can make comfortable or strong relationships with our fellow devotees to the extent that they feel comfortable in sort of nudging us, right? They won't feel that I'll be offending him if I nudge him. That is extremely important for us to progress.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay. I have one comment and one question for you.
Yes,
so
Prabhu.
Comment. So when you were talking about you used to get up early in the morning, and then you said I was young at that time. So I was thinking you are still young, it seems. So at least I. So,
by young, I mean I wasn't married at that time.
Your definition of being young. So my question is, so we see in this, at least in the 13th chapter and at other places in Gita also, where Krishna talks about that, like the kartaham iti manyate, those kind of verses are there where it basically, so Bhagavad Gita, at least we think that it is meant to what do we say, give us encouragement, but then still there are many verses like where it says that actually nothing is in your hand, it is Prakriti who is doing, or the modes that are doing, or Krishna himself is doing. So it sounds like a little pessimistic. So what do you have to say about that? Do you have any comment on? I have heard this from other devotees, not devotees but people also. So
sure, Prabhuji, thank you so much for asking it. I'll try to explain based on my understanding after hearing from our acharyas, whatever little I've heard. Right. So you mentioned two things, right? One was the point that, if everything, Maya is doing everything, right, and we are not really doing anything, it gets a little discouraging that, if everything is really done by Maya or by Krishna, what can we do really, right? So
Yeah, the point really is, if Bhagavad Gita is meant to encourage us, then why does it also kind of talk in a pessimistic way?
right,
Basically
yeah,
discourage us. Okay, I can't do anything. I just have to
right,
those kind
yeah,
of at
yeah.
times
So
when you read.
yeah, so this point of pessimism and optimism is really, it really depends on the reader, right? How we take it, whether we understand it in the context or in the way that Krishna is saying that in Bhagavad Gita. Nothing in Bhagavad Gita is pessimistic, right? To me, at least, when I read it, there is nothing pessimistic, but you are absolutely right. After talking to some people do bring this point that, if everything is done by Krishna, what's really in our hand? Some people find it pessimistic, but to go back to my analogy of a video game, right? So let's say you're playing a video game, right? Need for Speed, my favorite one, with a car race, right? So it is, to a certain extent, you could say that it is controlled by the programmer who created that game, right? Because the track that he laid out, the video game, the track that he laid out, you do not have the ability to move that car outside those two boundaries of the track. You have to go within the boundaries of that track, right? There is nothing that you can do that you can cross those boundaries, right? So in that sense, the person who developed that game, he is controlling it. But within those two lanes, how you make different maneuvers, how do you engage with other participants who are a part of that game, that really depends upon you. So there is some freedom, although you're not completely free inside that game, but there is some degree of freedom or the free will that has been provided to you to sort of play that game really. So basically, in the bigger context, it is correct. Everything is controlled by Krishna. And whenever he wants, the software, the developer can change the rules of the game immediately, right? Whether you like it or not, he can make the road in front of you disappear by using a cheat code, right? Because he has the ultimate power. So in that sense, Krishna is the absolute controller, that is true. But at the same time, we have been provided some free will to sort of maneuver ourselves the way we like in this material world. So we are not completely free, but at the same time, we do have a free will, which we have a choice. How do we want to engage? Whether we want to engage ourselves under the influence of the three modes of material nature, or do we want to listen to our acharyas and the pure devotees and engage ourselves in the service of Krishna, right? So that free will, so we are not totally useless, so to say. So there is
I
no
know. And
pessimism.
doesn't Krishna say that if we take one step towards us, he'll take 10 steps towards us? So at least
Exactly,
that one
right.
step we have to take towards him,
Exactly.
So
And
we
I
have
mean,
to do our part of taking that one step,
right.
and then he will do his part, And also
Exactly. I mean,
Chanakya,
the whole point of creating this world is so that we understand that we are not the controllers. And by understanding that, we can go back to Krishna. The entire reason that he created it is for the very fact that we can come back to him, right? So he loves that whenever we sort of move in that correct direction, right? Whenever we use our free will to serve Krishna just a little bit, he would move 10 steps to make sure that we keep moving in that direction, right? And then it is on us. How do we take those cues and keep moving in that direction?
and also Chanakya Pandit said we have to be pessimistic about our material life, but we need to be optimistic about our spiritual life.
Right.
So Krishna, I think the Bhagavad Gita is pessimistic about material life, but I don't think it's pessimistic about spiritual life.
Right.
It says, chant Hare Krishna. That's optimistic. It's
Right.
saying the moment you chant Hare Krishna, it'll deliver you.
Right.
You just need to chant. And so in so many places in the Bhagavad Gita, it says all you need to do is chant. All you need to do is surrender. All you need
Absolutely.
to do. Of course, you have to follow some regulative principles, which are also defined. But it's giving you the path. So that is optimism. So the spiritual part is optimism, but the material part is always going to be pessimism. That's not going to be optimism there. So that's how I see it.
Hare Krishna. Even many purport, Prabhupada also says this, even though this material world is so happy, we should always pessimistically think that this is not happy. Even though we get, all the facility, material facility, everything is going good in our life, still we consider pessimistically think that, this is not the life.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the video game, if you start to not like the video game, what would you do? You would take out your virtual reality glasses, right? As soon as you start getting bored of the video game, so what's the best way to surrender to Krishna is to get bored of the material world, really. We have to understand that it's not really a place of bliss. It's really dukhalyam ashashvatam, right? So in a way, it's good to be pessimistic about material world in that sense.
Thank you, Prabhu. That makes sense.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, so it's 8:04. We will end here. Vancha kalpataru.
कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपासिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः।
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.
विष्णु वृंद की जय।